California's 2009 cold case solved arrest shocks community. On March 27th, 8-year-old Sandra Cantu skipped out of her Tracy mobile home to play with friends just doors away. She wore a pink Hello Kitty shirt and carried the innocent laughter that filled Orchard Estates every afternoon. Within minutes, she vanished without a trace. For 10 agonizing days, hundreds of volunteers searched fields and canals while FBI agents combed surveillance footage. Parents clutched their children tighter. Neighbors who never locked doors suddenly did. Then came the discovery that shattered everything: Sandra's body found in a black suitcase floating in an irrigation pond. But the betrayal cut deeper when the killer was revealed. Melissa Huckaby, the trusted Sunday school teacher who lived nearby, who smiled at children, who taught Bible lessons every week. She was the person parents thought they could trust. How could someone so close hide such darkness? Before we get into the story, drop a comment with your country and the time right now. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Orchard Estates mobile home park as Sandra Cantu burst through her front door, her pink Hello Kitty shirt bright against the fading March light. 8 years old and full of boundless energy, she called back to her mother that she was going to play with friends just a few trailers down. It was March 27, 2009. And life in Tracy, California moved at the gentle pace of a small farming community where children played freely in the streets and neighbors knew each other by name. Sandra's mother watched from the doorway as her daughter skipped down the narrow street, her dark hair bouncing with each step. The pink shirt would become seared into memory, the last thing she wore, the final image of normalcy before their world collapsed. In this tight-knit mobile home community, children moved safely between houses, playing tag and hide-and-seek until dinner time called them home. The Orchard Estates had always been a sanctuary for families seeking affordable housing and small-town security. But on this afternoon, something was different. Minutes passed, then an hour. Sandra should have returned by now. Her mother stepped outside, calling her name down the empty street. The familiar sounds of children playing had grown quiet. A knot of worry began forming in her stomach as she walked toward the homes where Sandra had planned to visit. The friends were there, but Sandra wasn't. No one had seen her. No one knew where she had gone. In the space of an afternoon, an 8-year-old girl had simply vanished. As darkness fell over Tracy, the Cantu family's worry transformed into panic. Sandra's mother dialed 911, her voice shaking as she reported her daughter missing. The pink Hello Kitty shirt, once a cheerful detail of a normal day, now became crucial evidence in an official missing child report that would launch the largest search operation in the city's history. Tracy police officers arrived at Orchard Estates within minutes, their patrol cars casting red and blue lights across the mobile home park. The missing child report, hastily filled out with trembling hands, contained the basic details that would soon be broadcast across California. Sandra Renee Cantu, 8 years old, 4 feet tall, brown hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing a pink Hello Kitty shirt and black leggings. Officers began methodically searching every home, every shed, every possible hiding place where a child might be found. Flashlights cut through the darkness as neighbors joined the search, calling Sandra's name until their voices grew hoarse. The mobile home park became a maze of worried voices and moving lights, each shadow holding the possibility of answers or deeper fear. Sandra's father paced the narrow streets, his hands clenched into fists as helplessness washed over him. This was every parent's worst nightmare, that moment when protection fails, when love isn't enough to keep a child safe. The steady, quiet man who worked hard to provide for his family now faced an enemy he couldn't fight, a problem he couldn't solve with determination alone. Police officers went door to door, interviewing neighbors and friends, building a timeline of Sandra's last known movements. Each conversation added pieces to a puzzle that seemed to have no solution. She had been here, playing and laughing. Then she was gone, as if the earth had opened up and swallowed her whole. The search continued through the night, but Tracy woke on March 28th to the devastating reality that Sandra Cantu was still missing. By morning, word of Sandra's disappearance had spread beyond the mobile home park. The missing child report sparked immediate action as the Tracy Police Department activated emergency protocols. Hundreds of volunteers answered the call, transforming the city into a massive search operation. Copy machines worked overtime, producing thousands of missing person flyers, each one bearing Sandra's smiling school photograph and the desperate plea for information. The flyers became symbols of hope and heartbreak, taped to store windows and telephone poles throughout Tracy and beyond. Sandra's innocent face looked out from every corner, her bright smile a stark contrast to the fear gripping the community. Volunteers organized into search parties, combing through fields, drainage ditches, and orchards that surrounded the small city. Each group carried stacks of flyers, spreading Sandra's image far beyond the boundaries of her neighborhood. The FBI joined the investigation on March 28, bringing federal resources and expertise to supplement local efforts. Special agents arrived with advanced equipment and investigative techniques, transforming the Tracy Police Department into a command center for what was becoming a major missing child case. The collaboration between local and federal law enforcement signaled the seriousness of Sandra's disappearance and the commitment to finding her. Media outlets picked up the story, broadcasting Sandra's photograph across Northern California. News vans arrived in Tracy, their satellite dishes and cameras turning the quiet farming community into the center of regional attention. Sandra's family found themselves thrust into the spotlight, facing cameras and microphones as they pleaded for their daughter's safe return. The pink Hello Kitty shirt became a detail repeated in every news report, a heartbreaking symbol of interrupted childhood. Community centers and churches opened their doors as volunteer coordination points. Tables were set up with maps of search areas, contact lists, and supplies for the growing army of people determined to bring Sandra home. The outpouring of support overwhelmed the small city's infrastructure, but no one complained. Every person who joined the search brought hope that Sandra would be found alive and unharmed. March 29th brought a breakthrough that would haunt the investigation and capture national attention. Tracy, police investigators, working with FBI technical specialists, discovered surveillance footage from a nearby church that captured Sandra's final moments of freedom. The security camera had recorded her skipping happily down the street, unaware that these would be her last steps as a carefree child. The surveillance footage became both a blessing and a curse for the investigation. It provided crucial timing information, showing exactly when Sandra had disappeared and confirming the pink Hello Kitty shirt that witnesses remembered. But the grainy images also created an indelible record of innocence about to be destroyed, a haunting loop that would be replayed on television screens across the country. FBI agents enhanced and analyzed every frame of the footage, searching for clues that might reveal what happened next. The timestamp showed Sandra walking past the church at approximately 4 p.m., just minutes before her family noticed her absence. She appeared happy and carefree, showing no signs of distress or awareness of danger. The footage confirmed that whatever happened to Sandra occurred within a very narrow window of time, in broad daylight, in her own neighborhood. News networks seized on the surveillance footage, broadcasting the images of Sandra skipping past the camera with the innocence of a child heading to play. The footage became a powerful tool for generating public awareness, but it also intensified the emotional impact of her disappearance. Viewers across California watched an 8-year-old girl walking toward an unknown fate, her final moments of normal childhood preserved forever on security camera. The discovery of the footage energized the investigation and expanded the search area. If Sandra had been at the church at 4 p.m., investigators could focus on a specific time frame and location. Every minute after 4 p.m. became crucial. Every possible witness during that narrow window potentially vital to solving the case. The pink Hello Kitty shirt, captured clearly in the surveillance footage, became the last confirmed sighting of Sandra Cantu. As March turned into April, the investigation took on a more systematic and intrusive character. Tracy, police detectives, working closely with FBI behavioral analysts, began conducting detailed interviews with neighbors and family friends. The interview notes, carefully documented and cross-referenced, began revealing the complex social dynamics of the Orchard Estates mobile home park and the people who lived within Sandra's small world. Among the neighbors interviewed was Melissa Huckaby, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher who lived nearby with her own daughter. Melissa was known throughout the community as a friendly, religious woman who taught Bible lessons and seemed to genuinely care about children. Her daughter often played with Sandra and other kids in the neighborhood, making Melissa a familiar and trusted figure among the families. But during her police interview, Melissa exhibited behavior that struck investigators as odd. She volunteered information about a missing suitcase, claiming that someone had stolen it from her home around the time Sandra disappeared. The details seemed random and unconnected to the case, but experienced investigators knew that guilty parties often inserted themselves into investigations or provided unsolicited information as a form of misdirection. Melissa's story about the stolen suitcase was documented carefully in the interview notes, though it seemed to have little relevance to Sandra's disappearance. She claimed the suitcase was black and had been taken from her home, though she couldn't explain who might have taken it or why. The timing of the alleged theft, coinciding with Sandra's disappearance, raised subtle red flags for investigators who were trained to notice unusual coincidences. Tension began building in the mobile home park as rumors and suspicions spread among neighbors. The close-knit community that had initially unified in searching for Sandra now struggled with growing mistrust and fear. Parents questioned everyone, including people they had previously considered friends. The investigation notes documented this growing paranoia as neighbors began reporting suspicious activities and pointing fingers at each other in desperate attempts to help solve the case. The first week of April brought a mixture of hope and desperation to Tracy. Vigil candles flickered in the evening darkness as the community gathered for prayer services and memorial events honoring Sandra's life while still hoping for her safe return. Churches opened their doors for continuous prayer sessions, with candles burning around the clock as symbols of unwavering hope and faith. Sandra's family attended every vigil, drawing strength from the community's support while battling their own private agony. The candles represented more than just light in the darkness. They symbolized the collective refusal to give up, the shared belief that love and prayer could somehow bring Sandra home. Hundreds of people participated in these gatherings, their faces illuminated by candlelight as they sang hymns and whispered prayers for a little girl they had never met but had come to love. Children from Sandra's school created artwork and wrote letters expressing their hopes for her safe return. The innocence of these gestures, crayon drawings of Sandra playing with friends, misspelled messages of love and encouragement provided moments of beauty amid the growing darkness. Teachers struggled to explain Sandra's absence to young minds that couldn't comprehend how someone could simply disappear from their safe world. The vigils also served as information-gathering opportunities for investigators, who mingled with the crowds and observed the interactions between community members. Behavioral analysts looked for signs of unusual guilt or excessive concern that might indicate involvement in Sandra's disappearance. The candlelit gatherings became both spiritual events and subtle investigative tools in the search for truth. As April progressed, the vigils took on a more desperate character. The initial optimism about finding Sandra alive began to fade, though no one spoke openly about their growing fears. The candles continued to burn, but prayers began shifting from requests for Sandra's safe return to pleas for answers and justice. The community clung to hope, but beneath the surface, everyone sensed that time was running out. April 4th and 5th marked a turning point in the search effort as resources began to stretch thin and volunteer energy showed signs of flagging. The search grid maps, carefully maintained by law enforcement coordinators, showed vast areas of farmland and waterways that had been systematically covered by teams of volunteers. Every field, every canal, every abandoned building within a 20-mile radius of Tracy had been searched at least once, with many areas revisited multiple times. Helicopters continued their aerial surveillance, flying search patterns over the agricultural landscape that surrounded the city. The pilots and observers had logged hundreds of flight hours, their eyes trained on the ground below in hopes of spotting any sign of Sandra or evidence related to her disappearance. The constant thrum of helicopter rotors became a soundtrack to Tracy's ongoing nightmare, a reminder that somewhere below, a little girl remained lost. Volunteers who had maintained round-the-clock search efforts for more than a week showed signs of physical and emotional exhaustion. Many had taken time off work or neglected their own families to participate in the massive search operation. The initial surge of adrenaline and determination was giving way to fatigue and the crushing realization that Sandra might never be found alive. Sandra's parents struggled visibly with the prolonged uncertainty. Her mother had barely slept since March 27th, sustained only by caffeine and the desperate hope that the next phone call would bring good news. Her father's quiet strength was showing cracks as the weight of helplessness pressed down on him. They attended every briefing, followed every lead, and continued to believe that Sandra would come home, but the strain was beginning to show. Investigators privately began shifting their focus from a missing child case to a potential homicide investigation. While publicly maintaining hope for Sandra's safe recovery, law enforcement professionals with experience in these cases understood the statistical reality that the chances of finding her alive decreased dramatically with each passing day. The search would continue, but preparations were being made for a much darker conclusion to Sandra's story. April 6th dawned like any other spring morning in the agricultural region around Tracy, with farm workers beginning their daily tasks in the fields and irrigation systems that fed California's Central Valley. One worker, tasked with draining an irrigation pond for maintenance, had no idea he was about to make the discovery that would shatter a community's remaining hope and transform a missing child case into a murder investigation. The black suitcase floated to the surface as water levels dropped in the irrigation pond. At first glance, it appeared to be discarded luggage, the kind of trash that sometimes ended up in agricultural waterways. But something about its weight and the way it sat in the water seemed wrong. The farm worker, whose name would be forever linked to one of Tracy's darkest moments, approached the suitcase with growing unease. When he opened the suitcase, the discovery ended 10 days of desperate searching and began a new phase of investigation and grief. Sandra's body was inside, confirming the fears that the community had tried to push away. The pink Hello Kitty shirt, described in thousands of missing person flyers, was still visible. The child who had skipped happily past the church surveillance camera was finally found, but not in the way anyone had hoped. Law enforcement immediately cordoned off the area as a crime scene, transforming the irrigation pond into the focal point of a homicide investigation. FBI evidence specialists and local detectives worked methodically to preserve and document every detail. The black suitcase itself became crucial evidence, a container that held not only Sandra's body but potentially vital clues about her killer's identity. News of the discovery spread quickly through Tracy, traveling faster than official announcements and hitting the community like a physical blow. The vigil candles that had burned for hope now flickered for mourning. Parents hugged their children tighter, knowing that Sandra's family would never again experience that simple joy. The search was over, but the quest for justice was just beginning. April 7th brought a different kind of gathering to Tracy as the community struggled to process the devastating news of Sandra's death. The memorial flowers that appeared throughout the city at the Orchard Estates mobile home park, at Sandra's school, at the church where she had been captured on surveillance camera, represented a collective outpouring of grief and love for a little girl whose life had been cut tragically short. Makeshift memorial sites sprouted across Tracy, each one becoming a pilgrimage destination for residents who needed a physical place to express their sorrow. Teddy bears, balloons, and handwritten notes joined the flowers, creating colorful shrines that stood in stark contrast to the darkness of Sandra's death. Children who had played with Sandra left drawings and toys, unable to fully comprehend the finality of her absence, but understanding that something terrible had happened to their friend. Sandra's school became a center of grief counseling as teachers and administrators worked to help students process the loss. 8-year-old children struggled to understand how their classmate could be gone forever, their innocent questions breaking the hearts of adults who had no adequate answers. The school's hallways, usually filled with laughter and energy, echoed with quiet conversations and tears. The Cantu family faced the impossible task of planning their daughter's funeral while dealing with the raw grief of loss and the shocking knowledge that Sandra had been murdered. Their private sorrow became public as media attention intensified, forcing them to navigate their worst nightmare under the glare of television cameras and news reporters. Every decision, from funeral arrangements to public statements, carried the weight of community expectations and media scrutiny. Church leaders throughout Tracy organized memorial services and prayer gatherings, trying to provide spiritual comfort to a community grappling with questions about faith and justice. How could God allow such a tragedy to befall an innocent child? The memorial flowers and religious gatherings reflected both the deep faith of the community and their struggle to understand evil in their midst. Behind the public displays of mourning, investigators worked around the clock to analyze the evidence recovered from the irrigation pond and the surrounding area. The surveillance evidence that had initially shown Sandra's final moments of life now took on new significance as investigators traced her movements and began building a timeline of her final hours. Law enforcement had focused their attention on several persons of interest, but one name kept surfacing in their investigation: Melissa Huckaby. The Sunday school teacher who had mentioned a missing black suitcase during her initial police interview now faced increased scrutiny as investigators connected the dots between her odd behavior and the discovery of Sandra's body in a black suitcase. Surveillance footage from various locations around Tracy began revealing a damning pattern of evidence. Security cameras at local businesses and traffic intersections had captured images of Melissa's vehicle during the critical time frame of Sandra's disappearance. FBI analysts enhanced and analyzed every frame, tracking movements that seemed to align with the locations where Sandra had disappeared and where her body had been found. The surveillance evidence painted a picture that shocked investigators and community members alike. Melissa Huckaby, the trusted neighbor and Sunday school teacher, appeared in multiple videos moving about Tracy on March 27th in a pattern that suggested involvement in Sandra's disappearance. The black suitcase she had mentioned to police matched the description of the container where Sandra's body was found. As investigators dug deeper into Melissa's background and activities, they uncovered a complex web of deception and troubling behavior that had been hidden beneath her public persona as a caring religious educator. The woman who had taught Bible lessons to children and earned the trust of parents throughout the community was emerging as the primary suspect in Sandra's murder. The surveillance evidence was building toward an arrest that would shatter Tracy's faith in the people they thought they knew. April 10th marked the day that shocked Tracy more than even the discovery of Sandra's body. The arrest warrant for Melissa Huckaby was executed in the early morning hours as police officers knocked on her door at the mobile home park where she lived just minutes away from Sandra's family. The legal document that ended Melissa's freedom represented a moment of justice for Sandra, but also a devastating betrayal of community trust. Neighbors watched in disbelief as Melissa was led away in handcuffs, the same woman who had participated in search efforts and expressed concern about Sandra's disappearance. The arrest warrant detailed evidence that painted a picture of calculated deception and horrific violence against a child who had trusted her. The community that had unified in searching for Sandra now faced the shocking reality that her killer had been living among them all along. The mobile home park where both Sandra and Melissa had lived became a crime scene as investigators searched Melissa's residence for additional evidence. Forensic specialists collected items that might contain DNA evidence or other proof of her involvement in Sandra's death. The close-knit community where children had played freely and neighbors had trusted each other was transformed into a landscape of suspicion and fear. Sandra's family learned of the arrest through official notification from law enforcement, sparing them the shock of seeing it first on television news. The knowledge that someone they had known and trusted was responsible for their daughter's death added another layer of pain to their already unbearable grief. How many times had Sandra played with Melissa's daughter? How many times had they chatted pleasantly with their daughter's killer? The arrest sent shockwaves through Tracy's religious community, where Melissa had been known as a devoted Sunday school teacher. Churches that had opened their doors for vigils and memorial services now struggled with the revelation that someone from their own faith community had committed such a heinous act. The arrest warrant represented legal justice, but it also forced a reckoning with the reality that evil could hide behind a familiar and trusted face. The days following Melissa's arrest brought an invasion of media attention unlike anything Tracy had ever experienced. News cameras lined the streets around the courthouse and the mobile home park, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky as reporters from across California and beyond descended on the small farming community to cover the shocking arrest in Sandra's murder. National news networks picked up the story, fascinated by the betrayal aspect of a Sunday school teacher killing her young neighbor. Television crews set up temporary headquarters in Tracy, broadcasting live reports that repeated the basic facts while speculating about motives and psychological explanations for such inexplicable violence. The community that had briefly been known for its unity in searching for Sandra was now nationally famous for harboring a child killer. The media attention brought unwanted scrutiny to Sandra's family as they tried to grieve privately while dealing with the shocking revelation about their daughter's killer. Reporters requested interviews, photographers captured their movements, and television producers offered opportunities to tell their story to national audiences. The family struggled to maintain their privacy and dignity while the world watched their pain unfold. Melissa's arrest transformed her from a trusted community member into a figure of national fascination and revulsion. News reports dissected her background, her role as a Sunday school teacher, and her relationship with Sandra's family. The disconnect between her public persona as a caring educator and the evidence of her violent crime became a central theme in media coverage. Tracy residents found themselves besieged by reporters seeking interviews and reactions to the arrest. Many declined to speak publicly, still processing their own shock and betrayal. Others expressed their outrage and grief, trying to make sense of how someone they had trusted could commit such an unthinkable act against an innocent child. The media storm forced the community to confront their tragedy on a national stage, adding public scrutiny to their private pain. As spring turned to summer, the forensic investigation into Sandra's murder produced DNA evidence that would prove crucial to the prosecution's case against Melissa Huckaby. Laboratory specialists, analyzing evidence collected from both the crime scene and Melissa's residence, found traces of Sandra's blood on items belonging to her accused killer, providing scientific proof that connected Melissa directly to the violent crime. The DNA evidence represented months of careful laboratory work, with forensic experts using advanced techniques to identify genetic material from tiny samples. Sandra's blood was found on clothing and personal items belonging to Melissa, evidence that contradicted any possible claims of innocence or accidental involvement. The scientific proof removed any doubt about Melissa's guilt and strengthened the prosecution's case significantly. Additional forensic evidence emerged from analysis of the black suitcase where Sandra's body had been found. Fingerprints, DNA traces, and other physical evidence created an overwhelming case against Melissa, despite her initial claims of innocence. Each piece of evidence built upon previous findings, creating a comprehensive picture of premeditation and guilt that would be difficult for any defense attorney to overcome. The forensic investigation, also revealed disturbing details about how Sandra had died, though officials kept many specifics confidential out of respect for the family and the community. What was clear from the evidence was that Sandra had been the victim of a violent and intentional act, not an accident or moment of temporary insanity. The DNA findings suggested deliberate planning and effort to conceal the crime. As the forensic evidence accumulated, investigators began building a timeline of events that showed Melissa's calculated actions before, during, and after Sandra's murder. The evidence painted a picture of betrayal that went beyond a single moment of violence to encompass ongoing deception and manipulation of the community that was searching for Sandra. While her killer participated in those very search efforts, summer 2009 brought a different kind of weighting to Tracy as the community settled into the long legal process that would determine Melissa Huckaby's fate. The court calendar became a source of frustration for Sandra's family and community members who wanted swift justice but found themselves navigating the deliberate pace of the legal system. Court dates were scheduled, postponed, and rescheduled as both prosecution and defense prepared their cases. The prolonged legal process kept Sandra's case in the public consciousness, but also prolonged the community's suffering. Every court appearance, every legal filing, every procedural delay reminded Tracy residents of the tragedy that had befallen their town. Parents continued to live with heightened fear about their children's safety, unable to fully heal while the case remained unresolved. Sandra's family endured the additional torture of seeing their daughter's killer in court proceedings, watching Melissa Huckaby as she consulted with her defense attorneys and participated in legal procedures. Each court appearance brought the family face to face with the woman who had destroyed their lives, forcing them to relive their loss repeatedly throughout the legal process. The delay in justice also meant continued media attention, though less intense than the initial coverage of Sandra's disappearance and Melissa's arrest. Local news stations continued to report on court proceedings, keeping the story alive in the public consciousness and ensuring that Sandra's case remained a priority for law enforcement and prosecutors. Community members struggled with the waiting period, wanting closure and justice for Sandra, but understanding that the legal system required time to build a comprehensive case. Many attended court proceedings when possible, showing support for Sandra's family and demonstrating their commitment to seeing justice served. The court calendar became a focal point for the community's hopes for resolution and healing. As fall arrived in Tracy, more details about Melissa Huckaby's troubled past began emerging through court filings and investigative reporting. The psychological report prepared for her legal proceedings revealed a history of mental health issues, troubled relationships, and concerning behavior that had been hidden from most community members who knew her only as a friendly Sunday school teacher. The psychological evaluation painted a picture of someone struggling with internal demons while maintaining a public facade of normalcy and religious devotion. Mental health professionals who examined Melissa found evidence of personality disorders and psychological problems that may have contributed to her ability to commit such a violent act against a trusting child. However, the report also made clear that mental illness did not excuse or explain away her calculated actions. Details about Melissa's personal life revealed a pattern of deception and manipulation that extended far beyond her relationship with Sandra's family. Friends and acquaintances began recounting incidents and behaviors that, in hindsight, seemed troubling but had been dismissed or overlooked at the time. The psychological report provided context for these observations while highlighting the difficulty of identifying dangerous individuals who hide their true nature behind carefully constructed public personas. The revelations about Melissa's psychological state and personal history added another layer of betrayal for Tracy residents who had trusted her with their children in Sunday school classes and community activities. Parents questioned their ability to identify threats to their children and struggled with the knowledge that someone so disturbed had been working closely with young people for years. The psychological report became both an explanation and a source of additional anguish for Sandra's family and the community. While it provided some insight into how such a tragedy could occur, it also raised disturbing questions about what other warning signs might have been missed and whether Sandra's death could have been prevented if Melissa's problems had been recognized earlier. Winter 2010 brought a period of quiet anticipation to Tracy as the community waited for Melissa Huckaby's trial to finally begin. The empty playground at Orchard Estates Mobile Home Park served as a stark symbol of childhood innocence lost, its swings and slides unused as parents kept their children closer to home. The playground that had once echoed with laughter now stood silent, a reminder of how tragedy had transformed the community. The long winter months were particularly difficult for Sandra's family, who faced their first holiday season without their daughter. Christmas decorations throughout Tracy seemed muted, with many residents struggling to find joy in celebrations while Sandra's case remained unresolved. The family's private grief was compounded by the public nature of their loss and the ongoing legal proceedings. Community members dealt with the prolonged uncertainty in different ways. Some threw themselves into child safety advocacy, working to abolish friendship, implement new security measures and awareness programs that might prevent similar tragedies. Others struggled with depression and anxiety, finding it difficult to return to normal routines, while Sandra's killer awaited trial just miles away in county jail. Churches throughout Tracy continued to hold prayer services for Sandra's family and for community healing, but the congregations grappled with difficult theological questions about evil and suffering. Melissa's role as a Sunday school teacher added complexity to the community's faith journey, forcing believers to confront the reality that religious involvement did not guarantee moral behavior or protect communities from internal threats. As winter progressed toward spring, anticipation built for the trial that would finally bring legal resolution to Sandra's case. The community prepared for what many expected would be an emotional and difficult legal proceeding that would require them to relive the worst period in their city's history while seeking the justice that Sandra deserved. May 2010 arrived with the long-awaited beginning of legal proceedings that would determine Melissa Huckaby's fate. The court gavel that opened her trial represented more than just the start of a legal process. It symbolized the community's hope for justice and closure after more than a year of waiting. Sandra's family, Tracy residents, and media representatives packed the courtroom as proceedings began. The trial was expected to be a lengthy and complex legal battle, with prosecutors presenting overwhelming evidence of Melissa's guilt, while defense attorneys struggled to find a strategy for representing someone so universally reviled. The courtroom became a stage where Sandra's story would be told in detail, her life celebrated even as the circumstances of her death were examined under the harsh light of legal scrutiny. But in a surprising turn of events, the trial took an unexpected direction when Melissa's defense team indicated that their client was considering a guilty plea. The possibility of avoiding a lengthy trial offered some relief to Sandra's family, who dreaded the prospect of enduring weeks or months of detailed testimony about their daughter's final moment. However, the decision also meant that many questions about motives and circumstances might never be fully answered. Judge Frank Roche presided over the proceedings with dignity and compassion, understanding that his courtroom was hosting not just a legal case but a community's search for justice and healing. The judge's gavel would ultimately seal Melissa's fate, but it would also mark the beginning of a long process of recovery for everyone affected by Sandra's murder. The courtroom proceedings attracted intense media attention, with reporters and photographers documenting every moment of the legal process. For Sandra's family, the trial represented both an opportunity for justice and a painful reminder of their loss, forcing them to confront their daughter's killer in a formal setting while the world watched their private grief unfold in public. The courtroom fell silent on May 10, 2010, as Melissa Huckaby stood before Judge Frank Roche to enter her plea. The life sentence document that would seal her fate was already being prepared, but first came the moment that Tracy had been waiting for: Melissa's admission of guilt for kidnapping and murdering Sandra Cantu. Her quiet, guilty plea sent gasps and tears throughout the packed courtroom. The plea hearing avoided the need for a lengthy trial, but it also provided a moment of stark confrontation between Sandra's family and her killer. Melissa's admission of guilt validated what everyone had known from the evidence, but hearing her speak, the words aloud created a powerful moment of accountability. She would spend the rest of her life in prison without the possibility of parole, the maximum sentence allowed under California law. Sandra's mother broke down in tears as the life sentence was pronounced, her grief mixing with relief that justice had finally been served. Her father sat stoically, his quiet strength finally finding vindication in the legal system's recognition of their daughter's worth and the severity of her loss. The sentence could never bring Sandra back, but it ensured that her killer would never hurt another child. The courtroom was filled with emotion as community members who had supported Sandra's family throughout the long ordeal reacted to the guilty plea and life sentence. Tears of sadness mixed with tears of relief as Tracy residents processed the end of the legal uncertainty that had hung over their community for more than a year. Justice had been served, but the healing process was just beginning. Defense attorneys made no statement after the sentencing, recognizing that no words could adequately address their client's actions or provide comfort to those she had harmed. The life sentence document became the final legal word on Sandra's case, bringing closure to the criminal proceedings while leaving the community to continue processing their loss and betrayal. In the immediate aftermath of Melissa Huckaby's sentencing, Tracy struggled to process the complex emotions surrounding the case's resolution. Church bells throughout the city rang in memory of Sandra and in recognition that justice had finally been served, but the sound also highlighted the deep spiritual questions that the case had raised about faith, evil, and forgiveness within the community. Faith leaders organized special services focused on healing and community recovery, acknowledging that justice in the courtroom was only one step in the longer process of spiritual and emotional healing. Churches that had provided comfort during the search for Sandra now faced the challenge of helping congregants process their anger, grief, and sense of betrayal while maintaining their faith in fundamental goodness. The community's response to the sentencing reflected both relief and ongoing trauma. While Sandra's family expressed gratitude for the legal system's recognition of their daughter's worth, they also made clear that no sentence could truly compensate for their loss or ease their ongoing grief. The life sentence provided legal closure, but emotional healing would take much longer. Tracy residents gathered for informal memorial services and discussions about how to move forward as a community. The case had exposed vulnerabilities and shattered assumptions about safety and trust, but it had also demonstrated the power of community solidarity and the importance of never giving up in the search for justice. The challenge now was to maintain that unity while rebuilding confidence in their ability to protect their children. Local officials and community leaders began discussions about implementing new safety measures and awareness programs that might prevent similar tragedy. Sandra's death had taught painful lessons about the need for vigilance and the reality that threats to children could come from unexpected sources, even those who seemed most trustworthy. The national media attention that had focused on Tracy during Sandra's disappearance and Melissa's arrest reached its conclusion with extensive coverage of the sentencing hearing. Newspaper headlines across the country announced the resolution of the case that had captivated audiences with its shocking betrayal of community trust and the tragic loss of an innocent child. News anchors and crime reporters used Sandra's case to discuss broader issues of child safety, community vigilance, and the psychological factors that might lead someone to commit such heinous acts. The story became a cautionary tale about the difficulty of identifying threats that hide behind familiar and trusted faces, resonating with parents and communities nationwide who recognize their own vulnerability to similar tragedies. Television documentaries and true crime programs began producing segments about Sandra's case, ensuring that her story would remain in the public consciousness and serve as a reminder about the importance of child protection. These programs highlighted both the horror of Sandra's death and the community's remarkable response in searching for her and supporting her family. Expert commentators used Sandra's case to discuss warning signs that might help communities identify potential threats to children, though they acknowledged the difficulty of detecting dangerous individuals who are skilled at concealing their true nature. The case became part of ongoing national conversations about child safety and community protection measures. Sandra's photograph appeared on television screens and in newspapers across the country one final time as her story reached its legal conclusion. Her bright smile and innocent face served as a powerful reminder of what was lost when evil invaded her small community, but also as a symbol of the resilience and love that can emerge from even the darkest tragedy. In the privacy of their grief, Sandra's family began the difficult process of learning to live with their daughter's absence while preserving her memory for future generations. Family photographs that once documented happy moments now served as precious reminders of Sandra's life, her personality, and the joy she had brought to everyone who knew her. Each image captured moments that could never be repeated but would never be forgotten. Sandra's mother found herself drawn to her daughter's bedroom, where toys and clothes remained exactly as Sandra had left them on March 27, 2009. The pink Hello Kitty shirt that had become famous through media coverage was gone, held as evidence, and then returned as a painful reminder of that final day, but other clothes hung in the closet as if waiting for Sandra's return. The family photographs displayed throughout the room showed Sandra at various ages, documenting her growth and development until that growth was suddenly ended. Her father channeled his grief into quiet advocacy for child safety measures, working with local officials to implement new security protocols in Tracy schools and community centers. The family photographs that showed Sandra playing and learning served as motivation for his efforts to protect other children from similar fates. His quiet strength became a source of inspiration for other parents facing unimaginable loss. Extended family members and close friends shared their own photographs and memories of Sandra, creating an informal archive of her life and impact on those around her. These images revealed a child who had touched many lives despite her young age, leaving behind a legacy of love and joy that transcended the circumstances of her death. The family photographs became both a source of comfort and pain, reminding Sandra's parents of their daughter's vibrant personality while highlighting the future moments that would never be captured. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, and grandchildren, all the milestones that parents dream of sharing with their children, existed now only in the realm of what might have been. As Tracy began the long process of healing and moving forward, the community implemented new safety measures designed to protect children and prevent similar tragedies. Parents who had once allowed their children to play freely throughout the neighborhood now maintained closer supervision, creating informal networks of watchful adults who kept track of young people's activities and whereabouts. The Orchard Estates mobile home park, once a place where children roamed freely between homes, developed new protocols for monitoring visitors and maintaining awareness of potential threats. Neighbors who had previously enjoyed casual relationships now paid closer attention to each other's behavior, looking for warning signs that might indicate problems or potential dangers to the children in their community. Schools throughout Tracy implemented enhanced security measures, including improved visitor screening procedures and new protocols for monitoring adults who had contact with students. Teachers and administrators received training in recognizing signs of potential abuse or threats, though everyone acknowledged the difficulty of identifying dangers that might be well hidden behind trusted facades. Local law enforcement increased their presence in neighborhoods with high concentrations of families, establishing regular patrol patterns and community liaison programs designed to maintain closer connections between police officers and residents. The goal was to create multiple layers of protection that might detect and prevent threats before they could harm children. Parents throughout Tracy began having difficult conversations with their children about personal safety and the reality that not all adults could be trusted completely. These discussions balanced the need for caution with the desire to maintain children's innocence and ability to interact normally with caring adults. The new safety measures represented the community's determination to learn from Sandra's tragedy while continuing to provide a nurturing environment for young people to grow and thrive. Nearly a year after Sandra's death, Tracy came together for the dedication of a memorial created in her honor. The memorial plaque, installed in a prominent location where community members could visit and remember Sandra, bore her name, dates, and a simple message about her impact on the lives of those who knew and loved her. The permanent memorial ensured that Sandra's memory would remain a part of Tracy's landscape forever. The dedication ceremony drew hundreds of community members who had participated in the search for Sandra, supported her family during the legal proceedings, or simply wanted to pay their respects to a young life cut short. Flowers, balloons, and personal mementos surrounded the memorial as people shared memories and reflected on Sandra's legacy of love and innocence. Sandra's family spoke at the dedication ceremony, expressing their gratitude for the community's support while sharing their hopes that Sandra's memory would inspire continued efforts to protect children and support families facing tragedy. Their words carried both sadness and strength, acknowledging their permanent loss while celebrating their daughter's life and impact. Local officials used the dedication ceremony to announce ongoing child safety initiatives and community programs inspired by Sandra's case. These efforts represented the community's commitment to transforming their grief into positive action that might prevent similar tragedies and support families in need. The memorial plaque served as both a remembrance of Sandra and a symbol of the community's resilience. Children who had known Sandra participated in the ceremony by releasing balloons into the sky, watching as bright colors rose toward the clouds in a visual representation of sending their love to their lost friend. The balloon release provided a moment of beauty and hope amid the sadness, reminding everyone that love and memory can transcend death and continue to inspire positive change in the world. As the sun set over Orchard Estates mobile home park, casting long shadows across the streets where Sandra had once played, Tracy reflected on the journey from tragedy to healing that had defined the community's experience since March 27, 2009. The sunset sky seemed to offer peace after the storm, a natural symbol of hope and continuity that reminded residents that life continues even after unimaginable loss. The mobile home park looked different now, with fewer children playing unsupervised in the streets and more adults maintaining vigilant watch over their young neighbors. But life had returned to a new normal, one that acknowledged both the reality of potential dangers and the importance of maintaining community connections and support systems. Parents had learned to balance caution with the need to allow their children to experience childhood joy and freedom. Sandra's story had become part of Tracy's permanent history, a reminder of both the town's darkest hour and its finest moments of community solidarity and support. The case had exposed vulnerabilities and shattered illusions about safety, but it had also demonstrated the power of love, determination, and faith in the face of overwhelming tragedy. The legal proceedings that brought justice for Sandra had provided closure for the criminal case, but the emotional and spiritual healing process would continue for years to come. Sandra's family, while forever changed by their loss, had found ways to honor their daughter's memory and channel their grief into efforts that might help other families avoid similar pain. As darkness settled over Tracy, Lights began appearing in windows throughout the community, symbols of the warmth and security that families continued to create for their children, despite the knowledge that evil could sometimes penetrate even the most trusted circles. Sandra's smile, preserved in photographs and memories, remained a beacon of innocence and joy that no darkness could extinguish. Her legacy lived on in the love of those who remembered her, the safety measures implemented to protect other children, and the community's renewed commitment to watching over and caring for its most vulnerable members.